TGO, Tom Gruenwald Outdoors is brought to you by HT, premium ice tackle since 1974. Polar Fire Gear, this is how it's done. Tourism Saskatchewan, Canada's best freshwater fishing. Vexilar, ice fishing begins when you turn your Vexilar on. Kalispell, Montana, discovery in every direction. And these other fine sponsors.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Tom Gruenwald Outdoors. I'm Tom Gruenwald, and you know what? If you're like me, you're always looking for ways to increase your productivity on the ice. And over the years, I've learned one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that all of my gear is well maintained and well organized in advance of the ice fishing season. Hey, with the season about to get started, I'm out here in the workshop. We're not on the ice yet, but I'm in the workshop where I can go through all of my gear. I want to make sure my cold weather clothing gets washed, cleaned up, it's ready to go. Clean up my ice fishing shelters, check for any tears or maintenance that might need to be done on those so that they're ready to go. Power augers, you got periodic maintenance you want to do to keep that engine operating at peak performance. Blade sharpening, not only on my power augers, but my hand augers as well. I've got rods, reels. Reels need to be lubricated, especially with the special cold weather lubricants that are going to ensure that it operates smoothly even in the coldest weather. Tip-ups, I go through all of my tip-ups, make sure the fasteners are tight, that the flags are glued on solidly and ready to go so everything is set. Respooling, I got my reels, respool with fresh line. Make sure that everything is absolutely ready to go. So we're out here in the shop, we're getting things ready. I'll be working on my gear and we'll also be meeting with some specialists going to help us out. Small engine repair specialist going to take a look at my power auger and give us some tips for how to make sure that that motor is operating the way that it's supposed to be. Also, we'll be meeting with someone who's a footwear specialist, make sure the boots that I have are clean and properly waterproof so that they're all ready to go for the season. I'm not going to have any leaks. I want to make sure that everything is going to go smoothly for the season and it begins in advance with the right preparation. Hey, join us here today as we go through all of my gear. Make sure that everything down to the finest detail is ready to go. Let's take a closer look at tip-ups. I always like to take a good close look at my tip-ups before the season too. There's a lot of little things. For example, plastic frames, just check, make sure they're not warped or cracked. If they're damaged, make sure that they get replaced. Wood frames, same thing. If they're cracked or damaged in any way, you might want to get that taken care of. Here are flag wire springs right here. A lot of times these can get corroded if they're wet, or they can get bent when they're being bounced around on the ice. Those should be replaced if they're damaged. Flags, a lot of times, what happens is out in the cold, that hot melt glue starts to come loose, and these flags will come off or come loose. This is a great time to get a little bit of hot melt and re-glue and reposition those flags. You can also use the replacement packs and use the little clips on there if you want, but it is nice to use the hot melt glue. I'll check all the fasteners. I'll make sure that cross shaft thumb screws here are tight. Another thing you want to do is make sure the trip shaft itself is tight. Sometimes this can actually come loose if you grasp the spool and just turn a little bit on this, make sure it's tight. If it does feel loose, turn it back so it's tightened up. Another thing that is certainly critical is making sure that that tip-up is turning smoothly. If it's not turning smoothly, it might be a good time to get out that extra blue lube and re-lubricate the tip-up. Checking the line. I've seen things like people taking hooks, for example, and they'll actually stick the hooks into the line. Things like that will damage it. We don't want to take any chances. You go through all that work of getting that big fish on. You don't want to lose it because the line breaks. If there is any damage, take that line off, replace it. Before you put the new line on, sometimes if it's a little bit dirty, I'll take a little light brush, maybe some just water in the sink or some soapy water, and just kind of clean it off a little bit so that everything is in perfect shape and ready to go. It's important to care for your electronics. Let's go take a look at electronics. You can't help but not talk about sonar. It's a vital part of today's ice fishing approaches. I like to take just a light cloth and just kind of wipe the entire unit down before I put it away for the year. I also take it out of the carry case, just let it sit out, make sure there's no moisture in there that might build up and cause any kind of problems during the off season. Also, I like to go in, just kind of clean off these terminals. It usually doesn't require a whole lot, but just a light wire brush, just kind of make sure that there's no corrosion that's built up on those batteries. And like the batteries that you're using on your electric augers, these do need to be charged not only after each use, but also monthly during the off season. So make sure you get those batteries kept at peak performance so that you're going to get the most out of your sonar unit while you're on the ice. And of course, there's a lot of other technology today that does require batteries that also need to be charged. So don't forget about your things like your underwater cameras. We want to make sure that these batteries are always well maintained and are going to be performing when we need them most when we're on the ice. Next up, rods and reels. I also like to make sure that my rods and reels are all in order and ready to go and organized. Some of the things I'll do is I'll just check over, make sure that there's no damage to any of the blanks, especially the lighter action models. Look at the guide wraps, make sure there's no damage to those, everything is in good shape. Take a cotton swab, with some of today's braided lines and braids would actually dig in and groove the guides. And if that happens, by using that cotton swab, cotton will catch in those grooves. You can find that and fix that so you don't end up not only with damage, of course, to the line, potentially, but potentially losing a fish. Reels, I like to loosen up the drag, protect the drag washers. I always take my line off. Line can contract, it can expand, and that can cause damage to your spool, and you don't want to have that happening during off season. Plus, just temperatures and things themselves can damage the line, which could result in a lost fish. So, take your all line off. Usually I'll go through, take a little bit of water or light soapy water and just kind of brush off and clean off the spool so everything is ready to go. And I can spool up with fresh line once I know what I'm going to be fishing for and once the season begins. Of course, another good thing to do, you can do it yourself or take it to a reel service center, is to lubricate the gears inside here. Both the actual turning gears themselves and the infinite anti-reverse levers is also another important thing to go through. Sometimes with some of the lighter tipped rods, you can have things happen that the tip tops, just that little bit of glue that's holding them in place, that can dry out in the cold. The tips can come off. You might want to replace the tips. After everything is all set, I like to make sure I store my rods in a storage tube. That'll help prevent things like this from happening, especially to the lighter rods. Keep that inside the tube. I put the tubes inside my rod cases, which are all labeled with luggage tags. They'll say whether they're ultralight, micro, my walleye, pike, whatever. All of them are put together. When I'm looking for my rods, they're ready to go. They're easy to find. And I'm able to get out on the ice and be efficient right from the get-go. Coming up next, let's go and meet with Amanda over at Brooks Shoes and Repair. We're with Amanda at Brooks Shoes and Repair in Waupun, Wisconsin. And Amanda, I want to just say thank you very much for joining us here today and welcome to TGO. We are going to be sitting down and we're talking about a lot of the different things that we need to do to get ready for the ice fishing season. Can you help us out? You're an expert in footwear. What can you tell us?
Most important thing is to use the right care product with each type of boot that you have, and then cleaning them as best as you can before you do that. We have this boot, which is a leather canvas upper combination. So on this style boot, you would want to use the leather protector, which Red Wing has, to keep the leather condition, but then the Nature Seal is what you can use on the canvas also to help keep that from dry rotting and not cracking in the off season. Then you have an all leather boot, the Elk Tracker, which is insulated, waterproof. So the most important thing would be to clean this boot off really good. Make sure you're getting the welt of the boot nice and clean so that this isn't going to dry rot here or crack. Keeping it nice and conditioned. Nature Seal is what you'd want to use on this product solely because it's again going to condition the leather but not clog up your membrane. This is a brand new boot that Irish Setter came out with. It's Vapor Track. And this one is nice and lightweight. It's got more of a tennis shoe feel. I think total this boot only weighs about 2 pounds each compared to some of the other ones get a lot heavier. Lighter weight, more canvas on this one. Great early season boot. Again, you're gonna wanna make sure this is nice and clean so that over time, this doesn't start to separate eventually if the proper care isn't done to the boot. They also came out with a ladies version this year called the Lady Hawk, 2,000 grams of insulation, waterproof. Products to use with this being a leather canvas combo too, you're going to want to use the leather protector and the Nature Seal on this boot. Things you wouldn't want to do is use a regular boot oil or a mink oil. Boot oil is for a non-waterproof boot to help keep the leather conditioned. Mink oil is to waterproof a non-waterproof boot. So that's part of not using the wrong product on your boot.
There is a difference. And what do you recommend as far as application? Okay, now I do a lot of ice fishing. I'm out frequently and I'm out sometimes 10, 12, 14 hours at a pop. What's recommended? Is there a way of being able to tell when the boot needs to be treated again? And how often, how frequently would you suggest applying these products?
Sure. When you have an all leather boot, obviously your pants are a lot of times covering this top part. So when you start to see there's a shading difference, you know, this has got that nice oiled look, darker, and this is starting to lighten up, you know that you're not keeping that leather as conditioned, because you want the darkness to match as much as you can. They recommend once a month, but for somebody who's more avidly out using their boot on a more daily basis than just the weekend type of hunter, you're probably going to want to do that once a week, even every 2 weeks, instead of the once a month routine.
Okay, and you can kind of see that, I think, if you look closely. This is the boot that I bought from you last year and used this winter. This is where my bibs did come down, and there is a color difference there, so this is due. It's going to need some work.
Correct, yeah.
Sometimes you get a midwinter thaw, you get slush and water on the ice. Well, at that time, going with the waterproof insulated boots like these are really nice. Anything special that you need to do with this kind of a boot to take care of that?
This one you're going to mainly want to keep it just wiped down and clean. You don't, obviously, because you're out trekking through whatever the situation can be, whether it's slush or mud, for some guys, you're going to have to keep these clean so that you don't start to get any type of separation. Make sure they're really wiped down good before you put them away, because what we find is a lot of guys like to throw them in the closet for the end of the season, not stop and think about it, and then they come in the spring and they've got holes or patches or it's cracked and they don't understand why that's happened and what's caused it. These come in everything from just waterproof all the way up to all degrees of insulation, whether it's 2, 4, 6, and all of their product comes either in mossy oak or real tree camo.
And after you're finished with the washing, obviously you want to make sure it's dried, and then you store it in a dry location.
Sure.
Off season as well.
Whether it's the box that you got it in, or make sure it's put away. But yeah, you don't want to leave them sit out in your front window to let them dry all summer.
All right, thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it. Those are some great tips. I'm sure that our viewers are going to be able to take better care of their footwear. And now that we have our cold weather gear and our footwear all set to go, next we're going to be taking a look at ice augers. We'll be meeting with Ron at Ron's Lawn and Sport. He's going to go through all the things we need to know to make sure our augers are ready for the season. We'll be back to meet with Ron right after this. Welcome back to TGO. I'm here with Ron from Ron's Lawn and Sport, and Ron is a small engine mechanic, and he's going to help me make sure I've got everything ready to go with my power augers here for this season. Now, and this is something that's really important. We're out there in a lot of different weather conditions. I want to make sure I'm at peak efficiency. Ron is here to help make sure that's going to happen. Ron, thank you for joining us, and welcome to TGO.
Hey, for some maintenance tips on your drill, the end of the season comes around. Hopefully you've been using premium gas without ethanol. That's going to alleviate a lot of problems. Also, with the 2-cycle augers, we want to use a lot of the oils we use today have a stabilizing product in the oil, but I still like to add some stabilizing product to my gas when it's fresh. Right when you buy the gas, add it. Some other maintenance tips with the drill. Throttle cable, you want to make sure it's working freely. End of the season, it's dried out a little bit, maybe it's a little bit of moisture condensation in there. Tip the drill outside a little bit so it can run down in, a little bit of spray lubricant, some silicone or something in there. Recoil, just inspecting the rope on it. Doesn't have to probably be done every year, but periodically pull the recoil off, lubricate the center pivot point. The auger itself, where the auger goes onto the shaft, to put a little bit of lubricant on there, some anti-seize. They've been on for a while. If it does have to be serviced, you want to be sure it comes off. Other points of the drill, to spray them down with some type of silicone or something just to keep them from corroding. They're plated good originally, but eventually things start wearing off, and just using them in the water and such, you don't want them to start rusting. The 4-cycle augers that we're seeing today, changing the oil. Check the owner's manual for your particular drill to make sure that you're not going to overfill it on oil.
That's a
Overfilling
key point.
can be
Yep.
as bad or worse than underfilling. Just create a lot of problems and stuff for you. So you just want to make sure that you do that type of maintenance.
Okay, and if you've been running a 4-stroke for a couple of years, do you recommend changing the oil annually, or is there a certain number of hours that it should operate?
There probably is a certain number of hours, but for a lot of people, especially like with an ice auger, you can maybe keep track how many hours you've been out fishing. It's hard to keep track how many hours your auger's been running. Right. For the little bit of oil, if you do it annually, you know it's done. You know you're not going to be having a problem with it. And then checking spark plug too. And for the amount of hours most people put on a drill, probably doesn't have to be done annually, but just to take it out, inspect it, make sure it's gapped properly.
Any other small tips or suggestions you would have in terms of proper maintenance and care of a power auger? This is something that, people bring in augers that's a common problem because of the fact that they neglected a certain part of maintenance.
Probably the biggest thing we see is carburetor related problems because people haven't used a stabilizing product, or they haven't used good gas, or trying to use gas left from last year. It's just lost its volatility, it won't fire up. So doing that maintenance in the spring when you're putting it away, not waiting until the day you want to go fishing to take it out, but getting it out ahead of time and checking things over. And just visually looking over your auger. I mean, if there's any loose fasteners, nuts, bolts, screws, get them taken care of. And by all means, if you got a question with anything, check with the local dealer and get it taken care of.
All right, thanks, Ron. It's also important to take care of your electric augers and your hand augers, or if you got a hand auger that you're putting a manual drill on, you want to make sure that you charge the batteries in full at the end of the season, and then maybe monthly thereafter. Just check, make sure they're at optimum charge so that they're going to give you a lot better performance on the ice, and of course, hopefully maintain the life of that battery as well. Ron had a great tip offering and saying, use some silicone spray, spray the flighting and the blades on the auger. Same thing would apply to your electric or your manual augers. And also check the blade guards and straps, make sure there's no damage there so that you're going to be safe while you're on the ice. All great tips to help make your season the best ever. Hey, let's head over to the laundromat and get our cold weather clothing ready for this season. Today's ice anglers have pretty big investment in the gear that they're using, and one of the big parts of that is today's cold weather clothing systems. And I think it's important to get done with the season like we just did to make sure you get everything all cleaned up so that you're going to look your sharpest when you get on the ice next season. There's a few things to remember. First of all, best off, most manufacturers will recommend hand washing. So maybe take these things, give them about 20 or 30 minutes of time to soak in a delicate detergent, hand wash, okay? Bathtub at home is a great place to do that, really. These things are pretty heavy. It's not something you want to really throw in the home washing machine, and a lot of home washing machines have the top load agitator type or an older agitator type machine. Very hard on this type of clothing, and because this is so heavy, it's also hard on the machine itself. Better to go to a laundromat, find a commercial front load style washer, non-agitating, okay? Hit cold cycle, delicate, again, a delicate type detergent, no fabric softeners. Fabric softeners will a lot of times damage the waterproofing qualities and the taping that are on the seams, so don't do that. Cold, delicate cycle, in the machine is okay. Hand wash is still best, but front load commercial washer will work. More importantly, when you're done with the washing, it comes to drying. You never want to put this sort of thing in a dryer. Worst thing you can do, the material will pill and it will damage the material, possibly to the point where it's not even usable anymore. Turn it inside out, get everything unzipped, give it a few shakes, air dry it. Make sure that it thoroughly dries before you fold it up and put it away. And then even more importantly, make sure you're putting it in a nice, cool, and dry storage area so that everything will remain dry and be ready to go when you get set for next season. For me too, another thing that's real important is I like to take all of the articles that I have inside the pockets. I have everything organized in specific places, so I know where it is. I take everything out, I'll empty it out of my left front breast pocket, lower left pants pocket, etc. I'll put those into a Ziploc bag and label them so I can put them back in and everything is ready to go after the season is over. Take a look at things too. If you have some spots where you have a stain, a larger stain on the coat, might want to try a little bit of spray type stain remover. Let that soak in before you throw it in the wash or you put it in the washing machine or hand wash, however you're handling that. If it's a little tougher stain, you can use a stain remover, spot remover that you put on. Put a white terry cloth or absorbent cloth over the top, try to wipe it off that way. If it's real tough, before you apply the stain remover, take a gentle brush, like a nail type brush, and just kind of rub through it with a little bit of that light detergent and some cold water so you can get those things all taken off and set to go. Again, taking care of your clothing, making sure that everything is ready to go for next season is really, really important in terms of washing. Finally, double check all of the seams. If anything tore a little bit, stitches might need to be re-seamed, re-sewn in places. Perhaps a zipper was broken or damaged. It's a great time to get all those things fixed up. So when you hit the ice next year, you're ready to go set to put out the best ice fishing season you've ever had. Obviously, technology's brought a lot of positive changes to the sport of ice fishing. We've got better gear and gear that's going to make us more effective and more efficient while we're on the ice. But that also requires a little bit of TLC. And we learned today a few ways to help make that happen. You know what? It seems like I'm doing a lot of this stuff and I'm working on it awfully early, but now I know when the season starts and that ice forms, I can grab my gear with confidence, know that it's organized, maintained, and ready to go. And you can as well. It may seem strange to be out here before the ice forms working on my ice fishing gear, but it shouldn't be too surprising for those of you that know us, because here on TGO, it's all ice fishing all the time.
TGO has been brought to you by HT, premium ice tackle since 1974. Polar Fire Gear, this is how it's done. Tourism Saskatchewan, Canada's best freshwater fishing. Vexilar, ice fishing begins when you turn your Vexilar on. Kalispell, Montana, discovery in every direction. And these other fine sponsors. TGO, where it's all ice fishing all the time.